But what I'm going to talk about today for the next 20 minutes, I like to think of as asteroids. Think of as these big, massive changes that are coming to our world, to our societies, that are going to be transformative and are going to make our lives very, very different. Come on. There we go. Asteroids are interesting, big, scary. We know where most of them are, the real world asteroids. We know where most of them are, we're keeping a good track of them. Occasionally we get surprised. And the same thing with these asteroids, these metaphorical asteroids I'm talking about today. We recognize a lot of them. Some of them are going to be really surprising with how they affect us. The first is climate. Regardless of what you are doing, whether you are media, whether you are industry, whether you're government, whatever you are doing, climate is going to affect what you do and how you live going forward. There is no escape from it. Climate change is real, it's dangerous, and it's getting worse much faster than we thought. We're seeing storms, we're seeing drought, and where I'm from in California, we saw massive wildfires this past summer. Wildfires where I live about 200 kilometers away from where the fires were centered. I still had to wear a face mask to be able to go outside and breathe and be healthy. But we're also going to be seeing refugees. If you think that the issues around refugees in the world are difficult today, they're going to be far more damaging, far more politically disruptive in the decades to come. And we will see war because of climate. Now, for those of you who are in the media, who are going to be writing about and speaking about these issues, this slide is probably the most important one for you to look at. This is showing what scientists call hysteresis, but is better just to call lag. The time between action and consequence. Turns out there's about 40 to 50 years because of the complexities of the ocean atmosphere system and how the planet works, about 40 to 50 years of lag between what we do, putting carbon into the atmosphere, and the results. What that means is the warming we're experiencing today is actually from carbon we put into the atmosphere up until the 1980s. What that also means, and here's the politically difficult and absolutely critical point, it means that whatever we do to push back against climate change, whatever we do to reduce carbon globally, we won't see the results of that. We won't see the benefits for a generation. So think of that not in terms of the environment, although that's important, but in terms of the politics. How do you convince people to change their lives if you know they're not going to see any improvement for a generation? That is going to be one of the big issues, one of the big asteroids we're facing. Brittle systems, the institutions and rules that we come up with to govern these kinds of problems, to respond to these kinds of problems. This is an image of one of the ways to essentially 3D fabricate a firearm. There are ways to use a $500 3D printer to print out a gun. When these designs came out last year, 2 years ago, every single gun control law in the world became obsolete. These are the changes we're facing because the rules that we have made in the 20th century and before increasingly no longer apply. Whether we're talking about privacy, whether we're talking about racism and tribalism. This is a picture that I took in Switzerland, of all places, a few years ago. A political party trying to push out the black sheep. The institutions, the governing institutions, the rules that we have made about how the world works, these are no longer working well for us. They don't know how to deal with the kinds of global issues that we are facing. Income inequality will be yet another driver, because we have to recognize that as the old saying goes, when you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And recognizing that some of our old problems still remain. This was an alert sent out to people on their mobile phones in Hawaii last year. Terrifying. It was an accident. They didn't mean to send it out, but it's the message that would be sent out if there was a North Korean missile attack. And these messages could be sent out anywhere in the world. Nuclear weapons remain a fundamental threat. Artificial intelligence. That, by the way, that was can I go back? Yeah. That was a delivery robot. That actually is my front yard. A delivery robot going by my front yard in suburban California. It's slow, it's small, but it's a sign. It's an indicator of what's to come. And we have artificial intelligence in our phones, we have artificial intelligence in our homes, and it's not just these things that learn how to understand what we say. These are systems that are actually able to do some things better than people can. Google has developed AI that's able to diagnose breast cancer better than any human doctor. We're seeing that across a spectrum of medical issues, where AI able to develop ways to do things better than we can. And here's the really important factor. We don't know how. As artificial intelligence, neural networks and like become more complex, they get harder and harder for us with our human brains to understand how they come up with their answers. And as we go forward, as these become more powerful, as these become more useful, we're going to be facing plenty of situations where we're relying on artificial intelligence to do things and we don't know why. And that's going to be in our cars. I mean, already if you have a Tesla, and there are lots of Teslas around here I've noticed, you have an artificial intelligence in your car. In fact, as we go forward over the next couple of decades, there will be a race between cars and phones as to which is going to be the most important, most powerful artificial intelligence in your life. And cars will make decisions, and you won't always know why it decided to change lanes just then, or to slow down, or to speed up. Because it's dealing with gigabytes of data, it's dealing with neural networks and sharing data and learning across all of the network of cars, and it's not sharing it with you. These asteroids are going to be really disruptive. But the last one here I'm going to go into is probably the most critical for media and one of the most difficult to wrestle with. Manipulation of reality. So this is a nice gentleman here. The boundary between reality and deception has become dangerously thin. Increasingly, our tools allow us to create falsehoods that are indistinguishable from reality. I know this for certain because the person shown here is not real. His face is entirely computer generated, randomly, from a neural network system. In fact, it was generated over the course of, it took less than 1 second to generate a face like that. There's a website you can go to yourself. It's called thispersondoesnotexist.com. Thispersondoesnotexist.com, and it will generate, every time you hit refresh, it'll give you a new face. About 2/3 of the faces that it comes up with today are very believable, like the ones I'm showing you here. Most of the rest have some little weirdness that just, you may not recognize at first why it looks strange, but it looks strange. It turns out it's like maybe it has different earrings on each ear, or the eyes are slightly off center. But we're doing this right now with still images. Soon we'll be able to do this with video, making a video of a person indistinguishable from reality. There's something called deepfakes that Daniel Funk from the Poynter Institute will be talking about tomorrow, so I don't want to step on him too much. But deepfakes are a way of taking an existing video of a person and layering someone else's face onto it. When done with artificial intelligence and neural networks, it creates a very believable video of somebody doing something or saying something that they never did or never said. And you can see there's actually a couple of different ways of doing it. The one that's where you see a little bit of animation, the guy moving his mouth and making Vladimir Putin say things. It's something developed at Stanford University called face-to-face. We are coming up with these really easy ways of manipulating reality. And there are all of the ways we're manipulating reality through our social networks, whether we're sending out tweets or whether we're using Facebook, or whether we're using Reddit and people are buying votes on Reddit, a big social network where things are brought up to the front page through votes by millions of people. You can buy votes to get stuff bubbled up to the front page to get more attention. Or maybe it's this kind of guerrilla, this kind of personal deception where people lie to Facebook, give the wrong birthday, give the wrong middle name so that they pollute the data about themselves. And Facebook is easy to manipulate. I put up a picture that was from when I was much younger, and I actually put I changed the date so it was the correct date of when I took that picture. And a couple of years ago, Facebook told me they wanted to show me a picture that I posted 25 years ago. Facebook wasn't around 25 years ago. There's no way I could have posted that. These systems are easy to manipulate. This is beyond propaganda. This isn't just making stuff up. This is a manipulation of how we perceive reality. Politically, the goal isn't to make a citizen believe something that's not true. They're not trying to make you believe an untruth. It's trying to make you disbelieve truth. The idea isn't to try to make you believe a lie. It's try to make you doubt what's real, to doubt what's true. And these tools for creating new realities are becoming more powerful really quickly, really swiftly, to a point where a teenager with a next generation phone will be able to do things that would astound governments of 10 years ago. What do we do about it? Well, one of the most important tools we have is our mobile phones. Somebody's mobile phone right there. Because they allow us to capture images. And when you have multiple people in one space, everyone here in this room with their own different cameras, own different phones taking pictures, you get multiple perspectives, and it's very hard to manipulate reality when you have a diversity of perspectives on the event or on what's being said. In the United States, it's become very common for whenever there's any kind of police activity that there will be people there with their phones recording. Not because they think the police are going to do something bad, but because there's a possibility. Or what we've seen happen, unfortunately, is the police will claim that the criminal or the person who's been accused of a crime has done something bad. But now we have the proof that no, this is actually what happened. We have multiple people standing around taking different video. This is something that happened in California a few years ago at the University of California in Davis. It's basically a small town. People were protesting, students were protesting, and the university sent out police officers to go and use tear gas, pepper spray, on the line of kids. And knowing that in the past, when these kinds of things happened, the administration would kind of claim that no, it wasn't really that bad. You had dozens of people out there with their cameras from different perspectives. And this is a video you can find on YouTube where somebody took 4 of the different perspectives on what happened, synchronized them, lined them up so you can see from 4 different perspectives, 4 different points of view as to what happens when that cop walked up and started spraying pepper spray in the faces of teenagers. Future historians will see the mobile phone being to the 21st century what the AK-47 was to the 20th. An icon and a tool of revolution. Something that is powerful and gives power to individuals in a way that is very difficult for governments to control. And historians may look on this calmly and say, well, that was very much like what happened with the weapons in the 20th century. Autocratic governments know this already. Think about what happens as soon as there is a protest or some kind of uprising in countries around the world, the mobile phone network gets shut down. Not because they don't want you calling your mom and saying you're okay, because they don't want you sharing the pictures. The mobile phone is a revolutionary tool. And we think about the mobile phone and we say, well, people are just taking selfies. Selfies are really powerful because you think for a second, what is a selfie but self-documentation? I am taking a picture of myself and I can prove that I am here at this time. I am using my phone to take a picture of myself because I know that I can now document my location and my activity. And when people are taking selfies, when people are taking pictures of the stuff around them, what they're doing is they're creating a firm version of reality, their own version of reality that they can use to push back when somebody, a government, a company, some institution of power tries to tell them that they're wrong, that reality is different. And it's not just going to be mobile phones. This is something called Snapchat Spectacles. Snapchat is a phone app, but they came up last year with these glasses with an embedded camera. So you can take a picture just by looking at it and tapping a button on your phone, and it'll go right to your Snapchat. Now, they weren't very successful, but my guess is because they're really ugly. But think about what this means. Very soon we will be in a world where any pair of glasses can potentially have a camera on it. Any pair of glasses, anything that you're wearing, a brooch, your clothing might have embedded cameras. Not to spy on other people necessarily, but to document yourselves, to document your life. Asteroids. There is a particular example in Earth's history of an asteroid causing a big change, and that was what's known as the KT event, basically the big asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs something like 65 million years ago. It was kind of a big deal. Now, I've had the good fortune of being able to travel around and see different fossils of dinosaurs. You know, I like a lot of kids, I was really into dinosaurs when I was young, and I never quite got over it. So I got to go to see the dinosaur digs in Colorado and in Berkeley and the fossils in Berlin. There's one fossil in particular that stands out to me, that sticks with me, that's critical. This was a creature known as Archaeopteryx. It was a bird and a dinosaur at the same time. It was a dinosaur progenitor to birds. All birds that are alive today are dinosaurs. Because what happened when that big asteroid hit the Earth wasn't that everything died out and we had to start all over again, is that some things adapted. Some creatures adapted. And so when you look around and you see birds, what you're seeing are the successful adaptations over hundreds of millions of years of creatures that were able to withstand one of the most devastating impacts in the planet's history. Withstand it, survive, and as they adapted, thrive. And that is what we're looking for today with how we respond to these kinds of metaphorical asteroids. How can we thrive? How can we adapt? What are the choices that we're going to be forced to make? What are the choices that we might want to make as we deal with things like climate disruption and AI and manipulations of reality? What can we do to adapt ourselves and our societies? As we move forward, as these developments continue to evolve, as our institutions continue to fail to withstand them, to respond to them, we're going to be faced with that challenge. How do we make this happen? How do we evolve as a society, as a planet, to deal with these incoming asteroids? I don't know about you, but I actually have a bit of confidence. Despite all of this, I tend to be optimistic that the human race, human civilization, will be able to grapple with these problems successfully. It will be painful. It will be a long process. It will be difficult, but it's not impossible. The challenge that we face is creating a new world as the asteroids of transformation fall all around us. What have you done to your brains lately? chances are you've had some coffee, has tea, some other kind of stimulant, some other kind of, it's a food, basically. Maybe you had some wine. There's also a pretty decent chance that some of us out there have taken some kind of pharmaceutical intervention, something a bit more medical in nature to change our mood, change our perspective, reduce anxiety, even us out, make us a bit more, well, normal. If you're lucky, you got to hang out with a kitty or a puppy or some other kind of pet that we know there's actually really good evidence that this improves your mood, changes your behavior. And if you're unlucky, that cat may have been infected with toxoplasmosis, which is a parasitic amoeba that evolved to essentially go in and go after mice, but happens to get into cat feces. And so what it does for mice, it actually makes them lose any fear. They're no longer afraid of cats. What it does to people, well, it turns out that there's some evidence that for pregnant women, oddly enough, it increases suicidal ideation. Not a good thing. For people who aren't pregnant women, it tends to make them, at least according to some studies, makes them like cats more. Surprise, surprise. It's unlikely, but there's a little bit of a chance that someone in this audience participated in this study that was just a couple of weeks ago that transferred a thought from the mind of someone in India to the mind of someone in France. Very clumsy, it took a long time, was expensive, very basic thought, but it happened. Somewhat more likely is you may have been a participant in this project that's been underway at UC Berkeley for a few years using magnetic resonance imaging to read minds. That is, to observe the neurological reaction while someone is watching a movie, and then by pulling from an image database, try to replicate in data the image that the person is seeing. Again, very clumsy, very primitive, but suggestive. There is an excellent chance that if you are on Facebook, you were an unwitting participant in this experiment, where some folks at Facebook said, hey, our terms and conditions allow us to do just about anything to our members. So they decided to play with the algorithms for the your curated data stream. And for some people, it pushed more sad stories, so more negative stories. For some people, it pushed more positive stories. And they wanted to see, how does that change people's mood? Because it does. Now, if your reaction to that is, there ought to be a law, you're right. But it can't just be a law predicated upon essentially trying to extend 20th century, even 19th century principles. As this technology evolves, as our ability to change brains, change minds evolves, we're going to really need to think through a new basic set of principles, a new core set of ideas that will allow us to build, as new things come up to surprise us, will allow us to have a steady set of ethical principles. Now, what we're seeing up here is the Magna Carta from about 800 years ago. It was an attempt, a very basic attempt, to set up some principles for reducing or limiting the power of kings and spelling out the rights of feudal lords. And amazingly enough, that actually turns out to be one of the fundamental building blocks that has led to a democratic society. In that same vein, we need a Magna Carta of sorts, that basic building blocks of principles. Because as primitive as the current version of technologies are, they're only getting more powerful. Now, aside from the unfortunate Russian mafia subplot, Limitless, from a couple of years ago, it's actually a really nice illustration of just what it might be like to have access to a kind of pharmaceutical intervention that makes you smarter. And the thing is, in some ways, they're already here. We have drugs like Provigil or modafinil, invented to fight narcolepsy, but it actually tends to, at least according to a Cambridge study, improve focus, improve pattern recognition. And it's also a mild antidepressant. It's great. I have a prescription. And it tends to arguably make people who use it just a little bit smarter. Then there are drugs like in this case, Vivance, which is just one of the myriad amphetamine-based
concentration and focus drugs, usually prescribed for people with attention deficit disorder, but has become very popular on campus as a study drug. And in fact, what you'll find is if you look at campuses, if you look at laboratories and research environments around the country, and probably around the world, these drugs are very popular. They let you stay up late. They let you focus and get your work done. And if you happen to be the coworker of somebody who's using these drugs, and you're not, you might be in trouble. Or to extend it out a little bit, if you happen to be a nation, a country that has strong social mores, these are not good. It's not a good thing to do. But your main competitor doesn't have that limit, you may be in trouble. We may be moving towards a world where these kinds of drugs are not just readily available, by prescription only, consult your doctor, but are actually specifically designed to make you smarter, to let you think more clearly in a more sophisticated manner, to imagine better, to create more. Drugs that basically give you a better brain. And it's not just pharmaceutical intervention. We have for decades imagined what it might be like when man plus a Burroughs desktop computer apparently creates a giant. Now, while a Burroughs computer may not be the cutting edge leading us to the singularity, we are definitely evolving our technologies in a way that give us greater and greater integration between the human meat brain and these digital information technologies, becoming more intimate. And bear in mind that as goofy as Google Glass looks now, they're working with eyeglass manufacturers to make them more svelte and stylish, and I'm sure it'll be wonderful. And both Google and Intel, as undoubtedly myriad others, they're working on a contact lens version. Something that lives on your eye, feeding you information, watching the world alongside you. And the funny thing is, it's not just about making you smarter. It's about changing other aspects of how your brain works, inducing more empathy. It turns out that there are some very strong neurobiological correlates between the brain and spirituality, between the brain and political views. Really basic things that, if we can establish these are neurobiological, they have the potential to be manipulated, to be boosted, to be suppressed. Perhaps it's via a drug, maybe it's via digital technology, maybe, as Miriam might suggest, it's through the appropriate distribution of just the right kind of microbe. Because we know microbes affect our mood, affect the way we think. And so what we need is this Magna Carta, or a Magna Cortica. A basic set of principles that spells out, here are some ideas, here are some ethical lines, some things that we should not cross, some things that we should always allow. And so what I'm going to suggest right now, over the next few minutes, is a basic set of five principles that, let's consider the version 0.1. These are not the definitive rules. They are instead the suggestions, let's call it the alpha version of what a Magna Cortica might be. The first, and undoubtedly the least controversial, would be a right to know yourself, to be able to see what's going on in your own head. And in fact, those of you who have undergone surgery over the past few years have undoubtedly recognized that it's actually fairly easy these days to get access to the video recording of your knee surgery or your actual MRI results on a CD or a DVD. So this is something that, okay, this is probably going to happen, but it'd be good to enshrine that. It's a slightly more controversial, might be a right to modify. Now, this could be something that sounds really weird. It could be something, actually, as it turns out, there's already a great deal of acceleration towards this idea as the rapid and widespread movement towards the decriminalization of marijuana shows. A right to get in and monkey with your own head. The hacker and maker movement have this great line, if you can't open it up, you don't really own it. Well, no one's talking about trepanation here, but at the very least, being able to get in and make changes to your own brain, to your own mind, that's a sign you own your own mind. And of course, right alongside that is a right to refuse modification, to be able to, whether it's to just say no, or to say, no, I will not take this mandatory drug that everyone in the office has to take, to be able to be natural, 100% organic, should you desire to fall further and further behind your competitors. Now, slightly more controversial might be a right to modify or refuse to modify your children. Now, children are not considered to have all the legal rights of adults, and in fact, parents have rights to make decisions, medical decisions especially, for their children. And so this just extends that. But what that means is that for some people, this will mean the taking away, deciding not to give the kid that particular boost that will make her more competitive. Or it's a decision, I want to do the genetic modification that has a 90% chance of boosting my kid's IQ. And if that latter one sounds scary, some of you may recognize this cute little baby from 1978, Louise Brown, the first test tube baby. And if you ever have a chance to go back and look through the media that surrounded her birth, it's fascinating, because you would really believe that the end of days was upon us. You had people, even as notable as biologist Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, essentially saying that the advent of test tube babies, and that was really the phrase that got used, test tube babies, was a harbinger of the end of civilization. That these were horrific developments. And of course, at this point in time, I would hazard a guess that there are a number of you in the audience who have tried in vitro fertilization, whether or not successful, or know somebody who has tried in vitro, or may even be the product of in vitro fertilization. It's become normal. It's become banal. It's boring. And it's here. It's everywhere. Imagine cognitive modification being just as boring. And finally, the final suggestion is probably the worst of the bunch, or the most exciting of the bunch. That is a right to know who has been modified. And the torch-bearing crowd from Frankenstein is an appropriate and intentionally selected image here. But think of it this way. On the one hand, you have the argument that if we know we can identify who's been modified, well, we can single them out, give them a scarlet letter, whether it's A, T, G, or C. Little genetics humor. We can spot who has been, and we can oppress people. So you have this argument that says, no, we should not do that because that will just simply allow us and give us the tools to oppress. And they may well be right. There's the other argument that you might want to know if your surgeon has had brain modification. If your aircraft pilot, for as long as we have aircraft pilots, has undergone brain modification. If your kid's kindergarten teacher has undergone brain modification. And so when I call out these 5 principles, these 5 ideas, it's not as to say, here are the rules, here's what we all must obey. I bring down the tablets from Sunnyvale. It's to say, here are some suggestions. Here are some ideas that may be bad ideas, but we don't know until we talk about them. Because ultimately, when we look ahead, we know that these technologies are coming. We know that they are on their way and that they will be powerful. They will change society, they will change our culture, they will change our economy, they will change us. And so we need to know, we need to have talked about what their impact could be. We need to make some decisions now. We need to have a map, an idea of the path forward before we reach the crossroads. Thank you.